I'm truly excited to be here. Thanks for joining me today. The concepts that we described yesterday, Pari spoke quite a bit about the leadership attributes of future leaders. Praveen's panel highlighted the need for low code, no code, and citizens developers. And all these concepts have a common tag or common connect to the future of work. And when you look at future of work, we examine two types of components. One is the anxiety around whether AI is going to replace humans, and also how can enterprise adapt what type of utilities they can put in place so that they can succeed and win in this new age of growth wars. Now, if you look at historically, the last 2 years with respect to the AI human collaboration has been phenomenal. In 2018, AARP, which used to stand for American Association of Retired Professionals, they changed their name to American Association of Real Possibilities. That sort of signaled that the concept of getting single dose of education early on in your career and leveraging that lifelong is probably over. Hey, even vaccine takes 2 doses for it to be effective these days. So we got to look at education as a continuous thing and learning as a perpetual component. And this particular concept has been getting very popular in the last 4 to 5 years. And in 2014, Harvard psychologist Dan Gilbert made a very, very, very famous TED Talk. It has about 7 million views in TED videos. And in that, he said, in digitally transforming world, we are transiting quite a bit. We are in a transient state all the time. That means humans are constantly evolving, constantly changing as they learn new things and acquire new knowledge. Now, my objective here is to give a perspective about future of work, what has been happening historically, and also give some of our real life examples of where we have made positive impact with organizations. Future of work itself is a very, very broad topic, so we may not cover all components. We'll be very rather clinical and focused on certain aspects. Now, let us look at a little bit of what has happened in the last 20 years or so. The second age of AI, where people started looking at how do we put in AI tasks for automation purposes, really triggered a lot of anxiety when it comes to economic models. And there are any basic literature review, literature study, paper review would point out to a number of such anxieties, whether it is a negatively correlated agriculture output to the number of people employed, or the decrease in the cognitive task intensity of jobs for college graduates post-graduation. And these type of studies are available in plenty. And to a certain extent, it is driven by our foundational belief that labor market is pretty much the sum of the jobs. For almost 100 years, we couldn't disrupt this notion that labor market is a sum of jobs, meaning as jobs increase, the labor market performs better. While that is true to a certain extent, the MIT economists post 2008 took a slightly different approach. And this model, if you are tracking labor economy quite a bit, you will be very familiar with this model. This model is what we call as the ALM model, the 3 economists who came together and defined this model. This model kind of was an eye-opener in many ways because it said that while there is a negative correlation in certain industries with respect to people employed and output, there is, when we look at the tasks in a more granular way, when we isolate the tasks of a job within cognitive jobs, manual jobs, and even further classify that to routine cognitive and routine manual, the cognitive non-routine jobs and the non-routine manual jobs are actually increasing. And even to a point like there is a distinct difference, distinct rate of growth across those tasks as we are progressing in this AI human journey. And this, even though it's a very simple model, it sort of opened up the minds of the professionals and start thinking machines not as a replacement to humans, but how do we put it together? How do we sort of integrate the human machine power and really stay focused on customer outcomes? And there are a number of such case studies around that. For example, if you look at the AI breast cancer detection effectiveness, it's about 92%. A very well qualified, super talented oncologist would have an accuracy rate of 95%. But if you put the two together, the machine and as well as a qualified professional, the accuracy rate is almost 99.1%. That is just outstanding. Now, this is the kind of power as we look at the tasks in which AI can help and where humans can play a role. The current future is truly, truly exciting. Now you have various databases, whether it is on the healthcare, energy industry, retail industry. AI-powered databases are available for whether you are a researcher or a field worker. AI is truly playing a collaborative role. Now you have a ton of evidence of that already coming in. Like if you go to a store like Lowe's, you will be starting to see, you could interact with a Lowe's bot that sort of eliminated a lot of the pain points in shopping experience. Customer experience management has just dramatically changed with AI arrival. The Lowe's bot, for example, helps you navigate through the aisles and very precisely guide you on all the questions that you have. Now, another interesting thing that happened, it was actually discovered by IRPA. But those of you who are not familiar what IRPA is, post the WMD Intel failure in the US in early 2000, the United States government really felt that we have to do a lot better in forecasting. And as a result, they started this organization called IRPA, which is a crowd-based AI big data-driven intelligence platform that would get data from different people. And there are some very fun stories if you want to check it out, where you can actually see that in many cases, the non-specialists who are not connected to the day-to-day intelligence work, they had better forecasts when it comes to some of the political events. Why is that? The access to data and the access to the information that is available has just been tremendously disrupted. While that is a little bit of a side story, the main point I wanted to highlight is IRPA has been commissioning an yearly study on, has our trust levels gone up when it comes to AI? And that's a very, very important change that we are seeing in the last 2 to 3 years. And they partner with multiple universities to release this index on our trust level. And in the last 2 years, barring some confirmation bias around accounting for confirmation bias, generally the trust levels of AI by humans have increased significantly, especially in the last 2 to 3 years. And intuitively, that makes sense. Let's say you are sitting in your home and you want to change the thermostat setting. You open up an app and you basically increase the heat or decrease the heat depending upon your need. And you don't actually walk to the thermostat and see whether that has been accomplished or not. Like something that you did maybe 5-6 years back. Now, that type of trust actually means that more and more collaborative activities would come in, and that would start impacting the job roles in a very unique way. Now, my intention is not to show that the AI impact on jobs is not real. In fact, the hollowing middle is a real and clear signal that we got to do something different. And in any economy, in any society, at the two end of the spectrum, which is pretty much a knowledge-driven specialized jobs, they are normally safe. I use the word normally safe during economic downturns. Similarly, non-routine manual tasks such as the caregivers, janitors type of jobs, they are also to a large extent safe. Who feel very anxious in an economy especially when they hear tightening labor market type of scenario, or the people in the middle, the people who are call center supervisors, the people who are doing some project management type work or a program management type work, recruitment coordinators, a number of jobs in the middle, which is in between a cognitive and a manual layer. That layer in any society feels a bit anxious. And we have done a number of interviews at Draup to understand this phenomenon better. But this is a real routine that happens in any downturn. And the one interesting thing is AI has the power to bring even that middle layer up. And we are beginning to see such evidence of how the cognitive component of the jobs can be amplified and the interpersonal component can be amplified, thereby a middle layer job like a call center job or a recruitment coordinator job can be transformed into a new type of a job. And there are two types of transformation that happens. One is in a call center job, as we automate more of the contacts through various automation, we see evidence, like especially in tech companies, in large tech companies like Microsoft, for example, the transition is happening more into inside sales jobs, where you have amplified the capability, which is the ability to connect to customers through their remarkable call center experience. You have amplified that capability and you have repurposed it to do something different. This is beginning to happen. And the other thing that is beginning to happen is the job itself, the cognitive task within the job, you're still playing the same type of function, but you are now having a broader strategic impact. For example, recruiters, a lot of their candidate screening job is automated through AI, but now the biggest thing that many companies are working is recruitment experience management. How do we work with the candidates, not just the candidates who are selected, but actually candidates who are rejected? How do we work with them to give the best experience possible? The whole concept of silver medalist handling, silver medalist experience management is a new concept in recruitment. People who just couldn't make it to the mark, but very, very valuable assets, maybe a year from now or a 6 month from now. And this is a fantastic change that is happening only because we are able to automate some of the routine tasks that the recruiters would actually perform. Now, as we look through these transitions, the question that is in front of the organization is, how can we work with their hollowing middle? Every enterprise has this, not the same effect that exists across the societies also exists within an enterprise. There is a hollowing middle which need to be paid attention to and totally transformed into a powerful human capital. And also, how do we put ourselves in a perpetual learning orbit? And this is extremely critical for us to not only be ready for the future, but also dominate the future. Now, this is a very, very broad analysis. There are multiple attributes that go into it. In some ways, I cannot cover this, all aspects of this in the next few minutes I have. But there are three things that we have seen that where we have either observed or we have helped companies implement. And I'm going to touch upon those three things and then have some closing thoughts around the same. The first component is having a dynamic job architecture. What I mean by that is because of the legacy HRIS systems that many companies have, the job architecture has become a very, very complex exercise where it is not very dynamic. It is not observing a set of peers in terms of what new jobs are coming in, what are the opportunities that can be opened up to our existing workforce. And this is not just in technology. Normally, the examples that would come in when you talk about job architecture are, hey, you have these awesome new roles coming into technology. We have an IoT engineer, you have an embedded security engineer, and so on. Or you have like a compliance engineer in cybersecurity. Well, those are all true. Non-technical components are also dramatically digitally transforming, and to an extent where we cannot even call them as non-technical, right? Let us look at communication roles, for example. You have at least 3 different categories of jobs that have entered this taxonomy, whether it is crisis communication, which was extremely useful during the pandemic times, whether it is community engagement, whether it is a digital community or a local community or a country-specific community, and so on. And also managing multiple streams of communication through platforms like Podium, for example, right? And a lot of these roles or your middle layer can easily be trained into these digital tech stack. And you can dramatically have some of the project managers or program managers could be transitioned into these roles. And these are all roles that are extremely, extremely critical across internal communication, external communication, product and technical communication. And having a knowledge, the challenge that we have seen is many companies existing taxonomy is not changing enough to reflect such opportunities. And the other party also spoke yesterday about the greening effect of the economy. And sustainability is pretty much entering every single function. And there are multiple roles, whether it is sustainability from a procurement perspective, sustainability from a communication standpoint, or from a product development standpoint. What are the aspects that you need to measure, monitor, and report? And there are compliance components that are evolving across Europe and US and Asia. So these roles have very simpler reskilling paths, like 3 to 4 month type of a reskilling path. And that can tremendously benefit your hollowing middle. Now, this is one component. So having a dynamic job architecture is absolutely essential in getting ready towards the future of work. And we have worked with multiple Fortune 1000 companies in where we have seen that this has a direct, tangible outcome. The second component is, in general, how do we boost the organization's self-belief, right? And once again, there are multiple attributes associated with this, but I was quite drawn by the dissertation that was published by Stanford researcher Daniel Green on self-acquirability belief, how important that is. Many of the folks in the hollowing middle truly believe that, are not at a state where they believe they can learn some of the new skills. And this is one of the problems that is actually impacting large enterprises and medium-sized enterprises. Because when you talk about all these new technologies and all the digital transformation, even the people who are closer to it hearing it do not believe that they can actually pick up one of that and drive it. And that is a very important component that we need to work hard. And the skill acquirability belief and the job availability belief in combination drives maximum learning outcomes. So this is a fantastic dissertation. Encourage you to check it out if possible. But the point that I was trying to make is every learning pillar, whether it is AI, cybersecurity, IoT, and so on, needs to be defined from a learning map standpoint. That means, let's say you take AI, there are some skill clusters that are common across roles, but then there are some unique clusters that gets factored in if you want to be a deep learning expert versus a computer vision engineering person, or you want to be a little bit on the device software integrated level. These are very different paths, and that has to be defined. And even some of the engineers have told us that these maps are extremely useful for them, even though they are technologists. Seeing this and understanding a mapping at a course level, right? Today, the other thing that has happened is we have phenomenal digital assets, whether it is in the form of courses, and you can actually classify these courses from a low cost, no cost, and a provided option such as a typical course provider option like a LinkedIn Learning or a Coursera. The where mapping like this also encourages your people who would normally not check it out. They can possibly, your enterprise resources can check out the low cost options or the no cost options, at least get in and then see whether they need to sustain in that area. So this learning map and self-belief is a very, very important component, and that can accelerate to your future readiness. And third, I know this is easier said than done, having an inclusive strategy. We spoke quite a bit about this even yesterday, how the importance of diversity is important in boards, leadership level, at all employee levels. And today, there is no argument that inclusiveness is the absolute way to go when it comes to conquering the future. And there is definitely a supply problem in the sense a Draup, when we analyze the SDE talent, the software engineer talent for Black ethnicity in the US, there is about 11,000 people, give or take, and an equal number of people, another 11,000 people who are in the adjacent skills near software development, perhaps on the IT testing side or on the IT services side. Now, we are not seeing enough defined plans to really bring these adjacent folks into software development. While people are fighting really, really hard to get people who are already in, enterprises have to change gear and establish academies to train, borrowing the assembly line concepts from Ford. Can we bring adjacent people at an accelerated rate and put them through an academy within the enterprise, and thereby they become SDEs in, say, 6 months or 9 months time frame? And this has to be taken very, very seriously if we have to have a meaningful future readiness. In conclusion, it is not just enough if we tactically plan, think about the future, track some evolving skills and say that we are future ready. We truly have to make the future inclusive across all aspects. And we have to do a number of strategic action items with that. But if we can do that, if we can impart self-belief in the organization, if we can make sure that this is an inclusive journey, if we can make sure that our employees have, in 1 year, 2 years from now, have case studies where an analyst just said, I was not connected to technology, now I'm a software developer, or even a QA automation tester, or a data scientist. If we can gather such case studies, then we will be onto this journey in a very, very powerful way. Thank you for this opportunity, and truly appreciate your time.
Thank you very much, Vijay. Yes, and I wanted to thank the audience for your questions. Really appreciate your participation. We have time for one since we're running a little over, and the rest we'll take offline. So we'll make sure you get your questions answered. Sushmitha is asking, will the future workforce consist of contract or freelance experts contrary to permanent roles that companies currently offer?
No, absolutely. Great question. We address that from a contingent labor standpoint. I think different geographies have shown different levels of maturity. Contingency work is getting very popular in Europe and beginning to show some faith in the US. I think it's going to be a combination of how we define the taxonomy. Certain jobs that would require hyper specialization can actually be part of contingent labor force, and also certain jobs, whether it is within marketing or an IT, where it is sort of sophisticated job but a little bit routine jobs, those also could go into contingent labor pool. And also certain jobs which require on-site presence could also, where you can't really outsource it, say 10,000 miles away, coast to coast. Those also, there also the contingent labor would dominate. I think the pandemic, we have some evidence that the pandemic has slowed down contingent labor To a certain extent. We are still building some models around that. We'll be able to quantify that a lot more granularly in the next 2 to 3 months. But it is for here to stay, and it will definitely be a boardroom strategy in the next few years to come.